Hello there everybody, my name is Sophie Aldred and I had the enormously great pleasure of playing the character of Ace in Doctor Who. And I would like to just remind you that you are listening to Gallifrey Public Radio. It's not private, it's public. And it means that you, the public, can listen to this Gallifrey Public Radio. And I'm very honoured to be on it and interviewed by it. So I hope you really enjoy the interview with me and all the other amazing stuff that they put out. And thank you for supporting Doctor Who all these years and for all this time, because without you, Doctor Who wouldn't be the show it is today.
I'm Josh Liston from On the Bubble podcast, an oral history of television fandom, part of the Gonna Geek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
The Eternals have their games. The Guardians have their power struggles. For me, this dimension is a beautiful board for a game. The toy maker would approve. And I do like this form. It's so small. To exist within molecules and atoms is fascinating. I could shape them, regrow, mold my form to provoke fear from humans as I extract nightmares from the scared and vulnerable.
You've dialed into Gallifrey Public Radio. We're a podcast dedicated to positive enjoyment of everything in the Doctor Who spectrum. Join us for weekly discussions ranging from Hartnell to Whittaker and well beyond. Your hosts are Jay Whitten.
I choose Death by Scotland.
Keir Hansen.
Arun.
And Haley Malley.
Darth Vader, he's a villain, right?
We travel through classic and new Who, explore the extended Whovian universe, and play a few games from time to time if we're left unsupervised. Oh, and a word on spoilers. We do discuss recent news, content that has been officially released, and the occasional interesting rumor, but don't worry. If we look too far into the future, we'll give you fair warning. Welcome to episode 369 of Gallifrey Public Radio, where we so often wrap ourselves in the warnings and distress calls from beyond, we need to be reminded occasionally of what needs care and attention within. I'm Keir.
I'm Haley.
And I'm Jay. This week, Series 12 continues to test the boundaries of the entertainment box it operates within by combining an external conflict with malevolent immortal beings with the very internal conflict of mental health issues. As a word of warning to our listeners, we will be discussing mental health, distress, and related topics in this session.
So this episode in particular has really caused a lot of conversation. In fact, it's pretty much dominating anything if you're looking for any Doctor Who news at the moment. This seems to be the forefront of a lot of conversation, and rightfully so, because it's a bit of an experiment as far as some of the topics and subject matter that Series 12 in particular has chosen to focus on. We were saying just last week where we thought, we're dealing with a lot of environmental issues, aren't we, over the course of Chibnall's era and so forth. But this is a very different turn. So I wanted to check with you both and sort of get your feel for how you felt this very, I will say, darkly toned episode, both in its context and its content, worked in that experimental sense, whether you felt that it was pulled off successfully or unsuccessfully, because there are people on very, very different sides of the divide here. Jay, what did you feel about this?
I feel like the first act was absolutely stellar. The second act kind of left me wanting a little bit more, and the conclusion just left me sitting there scratching my head thinking, what?
Okay. And I'm going to ask you to unpack that with regard specifically to the conclusion in just a bit, because I want to know whether you're referring to dealing with the obvious on the surface problem or some of the other things that were brought up in the final moments there. Mm-hmm. Haley, how did you feel about this particular television experiment?
There was a lot of good in here, but there were definitely times where I felt like they were setting up something bigger than they actually delivered on.
Okay. Can you expound on that a little bit? I mean, as far as where you felt that where they didn't give it sufficient detail?
Well, so we get like the villain's backstory as told in animated form, which makes it to me feel like this is something big that we're setting up here. Like this is like a real threat. We're going to take some time out of the story we're telling now to tell you where this villain comes from. And then like 3 minutes later, it's resolved.
Okay. Because we get this full explanation, the Doctor immediately starts going into gizmo mode. Mm-hmm. And gives us that solution. And that's actually something I had pinned for us to chat about as well. Obviously, as we mentioned in the introduction, mental health and state of mental wellness are at the core of this on multiple levels. Obviously, the direct impact it has on some of our primary characters, but it also has to do with the idea of, and this conversation that the Doctor and Zelen have at length about what one perceives to be the weaknesses of humankind and the human psyche, and the Doctor perceives to be a strength because of one's ability to overcome these things, hopefully overcome these things. And there's a bit of a question mark in that statement as well. So I shared an article with you both prior to our getting started in the session. Did you get a chance to read what this involvement from the UK organization Mind had to do with their contributions to the writing process for this story?
I was able to skim through it, but I didn't get a chance to really read it in depth.
Okay. Well, we always know that when it comes to science fiction stories of any that take themselves with any degree of credibility, they like to make sure that they bring in experts to sort of advise them on the sheer science of it, whether it's hard science or soft science and so forth. But especially with something like this, we're dealing with something that has to do with a different realm of the sciences in that regard. So they wanted to make sure that it was done not just respectfully, but done right. So they brought in the founder of this organization, Mind, in the UK, Jenny Regan, and she goes into this long discussion about the 8 months prior to this episode airing when they were contacted by BBC Wales about the writing of this particular story. And I'm not sure whether it was Chris Chibnall that may have reached out first as a result of finding out exactly what it was that Charlene James as the primary writer wanted to do, or whether it was something where he wanted this to be explored and gave that as part of maybe the skeletal setup to James and asked her, this is where we're going to be going with this, and let's make sure that we bring in the experts to do this carefully. But there's some really, really interesting stuff in this article itself. With regards to where they're being told to be mindful about not only what the characters go through, but how far back in their backstory it gets established, so that it doesn't feel shoehorned. Mm-hmm. Jay, I dropped one of the quotes in here. Would you mind kind of sharing that with us, just because I think this is something that I'd like to be able to discuss with you both?
Done badly, a mental health storyline will these days attract a ferocious backlash from an increasingly vocal public that cares about how the issues are portrayed. But done well, it has the power to give a voice to the 1 in 4 of us, UK statistics, US statistics may be as high as 1 in 3, who experience a mental health problem every year, make us feel less alone, and encourage people to seek support for the first time.
And you notice that depending on which other broadcast you saw, the BBC broadcast ended up putting alongside the credits, they split screen the credits, so the contact information for the BBC Action Line was there, which is really just a communication line that is provided as a free emergency service to individuals who just need a point of contact. They just need someone to speak with at that very moment for whatever their current concerns may be. A very powerful statement. But I wanted to point this one in particular because we talk about the idea that the criticism of this Chibnall era is a social justice agenda that they're trying to go through, and things of that sort, and trying to tear it down for that regard. But I wanted to ask you both: do you feel that there is a merit in approaching these things within the scope of this program that has always, at times has dived in or backed out of more serious real world concerns? Is this something that belongs in science fiction, or did you feel that it was not a subject that needed to be unpacked here?
I kind of think it should be everywhere. Like, it's a real part of the human experience. So anytime you're doing storytelling that involves humans, you should see this.
I agree. I think that there's not really a venue that I think that it wouldn't belong, outside of maybe like satirical comedies or something like that. But I think that this would be a great place to explore it. I just don't know that this was the proper execution.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that said, obviously it wasn't as if they tried to necessarily tack too much of it onto the end, because you could tell throughout that there were certain points where we were looking at some of our principal characters, both what they had dealt with at some point in their past that had been haunting them, in nightmare form, obviously something that these Eternals were trying to tap into. But specifically with Ryan, I thought it was very interesting that they decided to also take a little piece of the storytelling and tell it from an associate, an acquaintance standpoint. Well, best mates, but one removed from the individual who was undergoing this particular concern and what Thibaut was going through with his depression. So as far as if you felt that this didn't quite deliver on the execution, where did you feel that it either didn't ring true, or was it a matter that it just felt like it was contrary to the story and they should have focused more on the nightmare aspect, maybe?
I think having the person with the mental health issue, in this case depression, be a guest companion instead of one of the main companions was a little bit of a cop-out.
Okay.
Yeah, I can get behind that one. I also feel like it was kind of sidelined. It was like, oh, well, we're going to talk about it, but that's not the major issue. It's, Ryan's going to try and get him to talk about it, but he's very quickly going to deflect, and we're right back into the sci-fi aspect of it.
I also felt like you set up reasons why other, like, our companions might be having issues right now. We go into Yaz's backstory about some sort of loss she experienced a few years ago. We've got Graham still dealing with the loss of his wife and his fear over his cancer coming back. Both of those storylines could have adapted well to having some sort of depression or anxiety that those characters need to deal with. And because we aren't trying to deal with a new character's story along with that, you have more time to dig into the issues that they're experiencing.
Interesting. We did have, somebody did tweet with us today, a little earlier today, and saying that they felt that this could have had the room to be a two-parter.
Yes.
I was going to say that both the Yaz and the Graham storylines, primarily the Yaz story, like, I feel like that could have been an episode unto itself. Like, not a 3-minute little, 3 years earlier kind of sideline.
Right.
The thing with Graham, like, I think that absolutely could have been fleshed out more. I don't know if it would have been a whole episode unto itself, but, it very quickly kind of got swept under the rug at the end with the doctor.
I wonder to a certain degree whether the conscious decision to give it to us in these little moments, sort of peppered throughout, or in this case, it was a little more sort of bookended. It was sort of pushed to the beginning and the first act and third act, but was in some sense a conscious decision to say that you may not always be aware of the signs that someone is dealing with these things because of the way that they internalize them, because of the way that they close themselves off. In this particular case, we're dealing with it with the fact that our companions are gone for such long lapses of time that that we don't get a chance to see them, in some sort of a cohesive, linear fashion. So, which is going to lead us to one of the conversations that Ryan has at the close of the episode, but specifically with Yaz, I do agree with you that I would love to know a little bit more. I don't know that execution, while I absolutely loved the sentiment and the execution of the work they did in the scenes.
Oh yeah.
And I think Mandeep Gill did potentially some of her best work on the show. And it was very emotionally charged throughout. It didn't, I wish that I had known more about it through those little pieces they gave us, those little moments where she was back in her family flat and things like that, and kind of, taking her time having these conversations that felt a little disjointed with her sister until we get this sort of expositional or information or backstory dump.
I feel like from a storytelling perspective, if we had known that prior, like, if we learned about this incident in a previous episode, or even if we'd learned about it at the beginning, if they'd given a little bit more context at the beginning, then her nightmares would have been more impactful. We would have understood them better, instead of just sitting there like, the hell is going on, until the very end where I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That was the whole thing through the whole episode. And I feel like it could have packed more of a punch had they front loaded it instead.
There are times when I think the show is very effective at keeping us guessing about what it is we're actually seeing until the pieces all fit together at the end. Maybe this was not that ideal execution in that regard. Graham's story, I'm better with, start to finich.
Well, yeah, because we've got this history going in,
right? And the way that he sort of deflects and gives a little bit of a tight grin, says everything's doing well. He's getting through it. But even his friends can tell that they try to check in with him occasionally in that regard, checking on his health and things like that. Was everybody okay with the nature of his nightmare actually causing him to interact with Grace and so forth?
I was, because it felt like something that if he was going to have a nightmare, this would be something along those lines. It's like, one, his cancer's come back. Two, he's seeing Grace again, and she's acting like she doesn't know him. Like, I mean, that would be devastating.
Sure.
And then for her to like finally at the end be like, why didn't you save me? Like, I mean, those are like, I imagine the big three for Graham.
I've always noted when there are instances, I mean, we're not going to go like Nightmare on Elm Street here and things and talk about, manipulating dreams to nightmares and such. But with regards to some of the times when dreams have been explored in science fiction, and specifically nightmares, and that they often are terribly illogical, but because of the sheer nature of them, you may even be aware of the fact that you are in a nightmare situation, and your brain still tries to rationalize it or say that, this it makes absolutely no sense, but this is what I'm dealing with, so I'm going to continue to deal with this, as ludicrous or as implausible as what's happening may be on the surface if you were to try to write it out. But with Graham, I think seeing, as you said, it's this haymaker effect of getting hit with one fact and then another horrific fact and then the worst possible fact. And even though he knows that everything that he's hearing and seeing is ridiculous, his immediate response is, let me go back, let me try again. It's, I think, once again, a really, really fantastic scene from Bradley Walsh. Just continues to impress.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned about the animation sequence and that very, very unusual. Thank you, D Negative, for doing what you did, as far as that sort of storytelling, sort of forced mind share on the Doctor. That Rakaya, who's never really named in the episode, we all seem to know now that she's Rakaya because of her IMDb credit or something like that. That Haley, you said that didn't exactly work for you?
It's not that it didn't work. It just felt like it was setting up something bigger than it was.
I interpreted it, or I at least sort of, I ingested it as something where this was a storytelling style that had to do with a culture completely different from our own. Maybe it was something that in any way connected us to something much older in our storytelling origins, more of a pictorial kind of representation. And it was kind of interesting that we had gone back to 14th century Syria and so forth as well, too. But Jay, what was your take on that?
I mean, very first reaction was drawing the comparison between this and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows.
Okay.
that kind of, it's like, I'm telling you a story, so it has to take a different approach kind of thing. And it separates it from the main story being like, this is something completely different. Don't try and confuse it. It's, it'll come back to it at some point, whatever. But, it did feel like something that they were setting up to be a bigger thing, which it still might be the case. But it seemed like, okay, well, this is a big thing. This is going to be very important how this happened. And then it wasn't.
Similar to the Deathly Hallows, it kind of reminded me of in Buffy when we got the story about the first Slayer. It was also told in kind of the, animated, like, this is a story within the story, so the storytelling style is different kind of thing. And in both of those examples, in Harry Potter and in Buffy, like, those were big, like, historical things that were very important for storylines going forward. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like that's the case here.
Could be the hint of something that may have been more to the original draft of the script, perhaps, or maybe something which might also explain how I will say one of the consistent criticisms we were getting through reactions to the episode was that the conclusion and just going in and tinkering with Zellen's mind fingers was a little bit of a quick solution for these seemingly omnipotent, near immortal beings from another realm to be. Okay,
so that's one of the things I had a problem with that myself, with how quickly it was wrapped up. And then it was I had to like stop and remind myself, and I've been telling people this as we discuss it, is that immortal doesn't necessarily mean all-knowing. Immortal doesn't even necessarily mean intelligent. As illustrated by the fact that they had to get the doctor to get Rakaya out of it. Mm-hmm. Like, they couldn't figure it out. What's his name wasn't able to figure it out, so he had to get the doctor to come do it. Right. Just because they're immortal doesn't mean that they're super intelligent. So that's why the doctor was able to outsmart them. Now, I will say that the way that it was just like very quickly wrapped up felt very underwhelming. But it does kind of jive with what we got already from them.
I also wasn't crazy about the evil floaty fingers to start with.
Yeah, that seemed more like, hey, we're throwing this in here for creep factor more than anything else.
I feel like there were more visually interesting things that could have been done.
Although I will say that there's a decent amount of chatter out there of people that are seriously squicked out by floating mind fingers. So at least in that regard, it was effective for a good percentage of the viewing.
The disembodied wet willy.
Exactly, but the wrong end.
Yeah,
I mean, you get the bony end.
The reverse wet willy.
It's
that sounds like something extremely vulgar.
That sounds horrible. Yeah.
That does, yeah. Just slightly.
With regards to reactions and things, and this was a criticism that I had seen out there that I honestly, I'm still trying to take this apart. I've been going over the transcript of the episode to see whether or not there's a way that I've sort of processed it, and I want to see how the two of you have sort of accepted it. And that has to do with when we get to the final scene, we see obviously the repercussions of the ordeal, and the fact that as the doctor rallies her gang around them, including the girl who's been able to not only recognize the manifestation of her nightmares, but has been able to overcome them. I think that's more of the solution, really, than reversing the finger doodads.
Yeah.
Which was great. I think they could have leaned more into that.
Yeah, if they had, it would have been much more, much better.
Right. I'm not sure how they might have tied that back into re-imprisoning them into the Phantom Zone. Sorry, Superman reference. It's just going to happen. But that's I think that could have been the better avenue to pursue. But so they go through this ordeal. And it obviously it rattles them all because it has given them such an intensification of some of their worst nightmares, and for who knows how extreme that may have been ratcheted up. You have the torture device turned to 11, so to speak. But they're coming to terms with it all. Yaz and Ryan have their conversation. We'll get to that one second. But then there's Graham trying to communicate his concerns, fears, trepidations, and state of being with the doctor. You're a doctor, Doc. I felt like I should talk to you about this. And the conversation really goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Not only goes nowhere, the doctor flatly says that she doesn't have a way to respond to it, doesn't have anything to say because she's still socially awkward. Her words.
I did not like that scene. It seemed like she was ignoring him when he was speaking.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Now, to me, I took that as a bit of an indication that there are individuals who can help with certain things, but there are also areas of expertise where you've got to communicate with others who know better to deal with such matters. That even with regards to just simple communication, I just want to share something with you because I just need to get it off my chest. I need a listening ear. That's one thing. But if it was more a matter of seeking solution or seeking some sort of resolution to it, I think what was trying to be pursued was that the doctor felt out of her element. This was not something that she would be able to deal with, maybe because she wouldn't be the best person to speak to it because of her experiences. You don't want to bring this up with me because I've got more going on than I can share with you in kind. But maybe that just didn't come across. I just didn't like the fact that she specifically said, I'm the socially awkward thing. That's becoming a crutch. Yeah.
That's when, it seems like that's what they're saying when that's what the writers throw in there anytime they're like, I don't want to have a meaningful conversation at this point in the script, so I'm just going to have her say she's socially awkward.
I prefer that awkwardness when it's a matter of her disarming tense situations by saying some non sequitur or something of that sort.
Right.
I like that involvement of it. More of a comedic element. I can see that if you're gonna extrapolate that and say, all right, well, she can't just be socially awkward in tense situations in order to make light of things. It has to have its impact in other interactions as well. But this seemed really just a matter of very brusque. Can't help you. I'm going to stare down at my console and maybe later I'll come up with something brilliant and you can pretend that I said it now. That I wasn't sure what to make of that one. Then there's the last thing that we get here before we start to tease into the next episode, and that's Ryan really having a heart-to-heart with Yaz about the impact of traveling with the doctor as he's perceiving it. And he seems to be alone in this particular reaction. Did you get hints from anybody else that they were starting to wonder about the long-lasting repercussions, or did they seem to be kind of okay with continuing to roll status quo?
No, it definitely seemed like that was strictly a Ryan thing. But I mean, we have mentioned before that it seems like Yaz is getting kind of disenchanted with the whole situation, or the doctor in specific. But it's I feel like we've seen shades of it before, but in this particular situation, no, it seemed like Ryan was really the only one that was affected that way.
Okay.
I think Yaz is kind of feeling as a companion how she felt as, a beat cop. Like, I've put in my time at this position. I'm ready for my promotion now.
Yeah.
In a sense, yeah. Although there's something more to this episode that's got me thinking about Yaz in particular, because of some of the strange way that she's sort of reacted to certain situations along the way. And a part of that, I won't say strange, I would say maybe unique with regards to the trio, and the fact that she's not trying to throw herself into danger. She's looking for roles of responsibility. She's looking for more involvement. She's looking to sort of prove herself to someone, potentially herself, potentially to others. But it makes me think back to this article, this involvement with this mind organization that had an impact on working with the writing and the creative team and the actors. They sat down with all the actors and started working with them to make sure that they sort of internalized the nature of the portrayals that they were bringing forward. But this was done 8 months ago, which means that, and part of the conversation they were saying, or that Jenny Regan was saying, was that she wanted to make sure that it wasn't something so that it didn't feel like it was shoehorned into a single episode. It had to be incorporated through the nature of the character's development in episodes prior and following. So I would imagine that to a certain degree, this means that Chibnall wanted steering corrections to some of the writing and direction of these characters in particular in episodes we've already seen aired that give some some anchoring to what specifically Yaz in this particular conversation is going through at the moment. And I gotta wonder if I want to go back now and watch a couple of the previous episodes, maybe even going back to a little bit of series 11, but more so here in 12, to see whether there was some hint of that, about her kind of knowing that she's come from a place where she dealt with bullying and that she felt so isolated and hit such low points. There was that subtle subtext, or maybe, depending on how you interpret it, not so subtle, that she was having ideations of self-harm or even suicide, to the point where her sister, attempts to, obviously, recognizes the fact that she's run from home and so forth. I'll stop the record there for a second. Did either of you get any sort of an indication that there was the concern that she was going to harm herself in that runaway sequence?
I more got the sense that it was reckless behavior, that she was running away and doing things without necessarily considering the consequences.
Okay.
I definitely saw, looking back on it, you can kind of pick out the moments where Yaz tends to find that person that is struggling the most and, kind of go to reassure them. You think about the past few episodes we've had, and all of Yaz's interactions tend to be the comforter, the kind of, hey, like, things are going to be okay, and like getting the information they need while also, calming people down.
Right.
And like that kind of speaks to this a bit, but that's as far as I could draw the connection.
Okay. All right. If you do get the opportunity, or if you do decide that you're going to give the episode one more spin, I would ask you to kind of just follow through that sequence, kind of watch her and really check between the lines on her exchanges with the constable that comes out to communicate with her as well. Because I gotta wonder. I'm dying to know, and I'd love to hear some of the interviews that Mandeep does in the weeks and months to come about that sequence in particular, and kind of know where she was taking the character at that moment. But we're gonna, with regards to Ryan's side of that conversation and his concerns about saying that living at different rates and so forth, we're gonna get into something in the news where this may be particularly relevant. But yeah. All in all, would you consider this to be on the top half or the bottom half of the episodes we've seen so far this season?
I think it's on the bottom half.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree. I think it's pretty low. Like I said, there were definitely parts that were the first part I thought was great. The whole build up, the suspense, the whole mystery aspect of it was fantastic. And then once the doctor threw the helmet on Graham, and what happened to the squidgy console? Why did we lose the squidgy console? But at that point, like it started to go off the rails and just never really recovered at that point.
Also, we've had some really fantastic episodes this season, so being in the bottom half of this particular season is not terrible.
That's very true. Very true. Okay. I personally rank it a little higher. I will admit that it was not on first watch that it completely clicked with me, because I felt a little bit at a loss, like I had missed scenes or missed dialogue on first viewing. But when I really, really paid close attention to it on the second pass through, I caught a lot more to it. That gave me a lot more respect for it. So we'll see. We'll see how it stacks up when our season comes to a close in less than a month's time.
Oh, yeah, we have 3 episodes left now?
Yes, they market this so strangely, right? When we see the scenes from next week and they talk about that, they say, one more episode before the finale, 2-parter. who describes the season like that? But So as mentioned, there's this strange, well, not strange, I guess it's understandable, but this rather distressing little conversation that Ryan and Yaz have in the final minutes of the episode, and Ryan talking about the fact that he's not really sure if this is something where the repercussions, the ramifications of traveling with the doctor, not just with regards to the risk and danger and things like that, but the what's going back at home, And we always say to ourselves, oh, well, it's a time travel show, right? Doctor can just drop you off, a couple seconds after you left and none the wiser for everybody else. That's for everybody else. And particularly with an episode that really steps into conversation about mental health, that has an impact. You're dealing with death-defying situations and long stretches of time that no one else back home, your family and loved ones, are even cognizant of. How do you cope with that? So we thought, well, what is this going to mean for Ryan long-term? Well, it could mean something serious given what Tosin Cole's up to right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. So Tosin Cole has actually landed himself another TV role in the U.S., no less.
It's not just a role; he'll have the lead role in a courtroom drama that's going to be coming on stateside. I guess it's called 61st Street. I'm not sure what that's maybe in reference to, but it has already been picked up for 2 seasons at a minimum. So his schedule's going to get very full. That sounds like it could be potentially a conflict with a Doctor Who production schedule that is already known to be very tough to logistically arrange the availability of cast and crew.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that it's not doable. It doesn't mean that he is going to be leaving, anything like that. It just means that with the conversation that we saw in the show and this coming to light, there's a possibility the two could be related.
Yeah. It leads one to wonder. I mean, that's like giving somebody a very special episode. That's not a good sign.
That would have a very interesting effect on the dynamics of the TARDIS.
Yeah. It definitely would. Well, all right. Well, let's theorize for a second. So let's say that this means that by close of this series, Ryan alone is the one to decide to return home and go back and try and make his mark, and establish himself on his own, his terms. So that leaves Yaz and Graham, which we've wanted to have more interaction between the two of them and more camaraderie and more conversation and really let the two of them develop their relationship, with or without the Doctor as part of that triangle. But that means that you're missing that bit of the chemistry from the TARDIS collective. What do you think that might do to the series as far as the way that they would paint it going forward?
Well, I kind of think they might bring in another person to fill out the TARDIS. If having a crowded TARDIS is what Chibnall wants to do with his tenure on the show, it makes sense, I think, to add another person.
Right.
Or do we maybe see all of this batch of companions exit the show?
I think that's more likely.
Right. Not desirable,
I want to see it,
but more likely. Yeah, exactly. Not something I want to see, but that's what we may see if we see anything, I guess.
Yeah.
Another little piece of news to come out of this particular episode has to do with the conversation about these two immortal beings in the first place. You got some great name checks when Zelen and Doctor are having at it and their battle of wits around the gate there. Zelen basically drops some serious Canon conversation in there that you could either interpret as retconning or you could interpret it as sort of stitching the fabric of continuity together, going back not only to Peter Davison's era, but taking it all the way back to William Hartnell, which is impressive. So, Charlene James, hats off to you if this was your contribution to the script on this one for pulling this together. Haley, you have not gotten to our Fifth Doctor era. You were just shy of it in our classic rewatch, which we'll be getting back to in a couple of months' time. But not to spoil anything for you, just because you've gotten some hints of this already as far as meeting the black and white Guardians, right? So you got your Guardians, who seem to be not Time Lords, but as powerful as, if not more so, right? And they can sort of push Time Lords around a little bit with their manipulation. We're still closing out the Key to Time sequence right now, so you're right in the thick of that. But we really start to get the description of these Eternals in Enlightenment, which is really, really great Peter Davison story from Fifth Doctor.
Take your word for it.
Yep, you're going to love it. But has to do with these beings that are that in that story claim to be seeking wisdom and they go about it by doing these competitions and things of that sort, solar ships and all kinds of cool stuff. But this thing here with the story that we just received has to do with the idea of the Eternals being described as being just like what Zelen and Rakaya were after, which was feeding off of fear and nightmares and emotional distress and things like that. So then you got to wonder, can you go back and you can look at Enlightenment and talk about the Eternals as they were referenced there? Was that really their agenda? So it's kind of an interesting little twist. But I can go back even further because Zelen wasn't done talking. He mentioned the Guardians, who we know were tinkering with things. We watched them do it. But then he mentioned the Toymaker, the Celestial Toymaker, which is a great reference. Unfortunately, it's the story where you really have to do some digging to try to get the fullest access to it. But you've got this being that is basically using the First Doctor and TARDIS team as playthings, right? But it goes along with this sort of the chessboard references that Zelen was making and so forth. So I'm so pleased to hear this. I take it as more playing with continuity. I've seen some critics that have said that this is a matter. This is stepping on the brilliant writing of the classic era and so forth, as far as disregarding these characters that have never been fully appreciated. I think, if anything, it's another instance of Chibnall carefully selecting classic elements to say, you know what, you're starting to get you newer viewers, you're starting to get the larger scope of this universe that we're playing in here. And if you want to go back and reference some interesting stuff, here are a couple bookmarks for you to go, check out later when you get a chance to dig deeper into the back catalog. So
maybe in one of these year-long breaks we get.
Year and a half. Oh, he'll go super long on the next one. What's this last thing that we've got here? I just wanted to. We're talking about stuff that we've got in this episode, but we're not done talking about past episodes yet.
So the Doctor seems to have completely forgotten about the Doctor, but we as fans haven't. So some people have gone back and taken a look at the prisoner of the Jadoon.
Fugitive of the Jadoon.
Yeah, sorry. But they found things throughout the entire episode that were hinting at Ruth's true identity, like from the very beginning.
Yeah, we picked up on the Gallifreyan script around the break glass to thing in the lighthouse, but these other ones did not click with me, and shame on me, double shame on me as a huge Eighth Doctor Adventures Big Finish fanatic for not picking up on this, because it was so freaking blatant now that I look at it.
Well, yeah, I mean, in retrospect, they're blindingly obvious.
Yeah, the Eighth Doctor in a lot of the Eighth Doctor Adventures, specifically, there's a long stretch during Lucy Bleedin Miller's era where he tinkers around modern day London in an antiquated VW Beetle that like sticks out like a sore thumb, and yet he loves the fact that it just blends in and makes all these references to it, which was specifically what Ruth was driving. I did not, the penny did not drop, and I feel stupid for not having caught that. But the even more subtle one, and I'd be fascinated to know if it ever comes to light that there was some connection to this. I'd love to know exactly what the heck they were thinking with regards to it. But Ruth was talking about the fact that she first came to Gloucester in December of '99. She's discussing our doctor, 13th Doctor, is trying to ask her, how much of your past do you really know? And that's where things started to kind of get a little hazy. But she makes that reference specifically to December of 1999, which was the setting
for the Eighth Doctor.
Yeah, our TV movie, right at Y2K.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to take that, then that would say, oh, we're somehow connecting Ruth to the Eighth Doctor. I can't imagine how you would work that in.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm kind of thinking, just based on what I know of Who Canon, like maybe after the War Doctor is where she could fit. Because it seems like the Doctor has forgotten a lot of his and her time as the War Doctor. Uh-huh. And we didn't see that complete regeneration. Like, it kind of looked like John Hurt went to Chris Eccleston, but they didn't show all of Chris Eccleston. And I think you can fudge it, especially with the change in showrunner, and say, no, that was still like squidgy regeneration. Wasn't done cooking. this is what
she
happened.
looks a lot like Chris Eccleston, you know. I mean,
So,
the
I mean,
similarities
it's
are
uncanny. But I think you can say, oh, the regeneration energy was still in flux and technobabble, and that's where this doctor fits.
Oh, man. I don't know.
She's got a point.
But you know what the outcry would be? If they
What,
actually
shoehorning a doctor between 8 and 9? What will the fans do with themselves?
rage, burn the castle down. I don't know.
Again,
yeah. They have established this as their MO.
I mean, it's that time of the week, you know.
I would kind of love it if every single showrunner from now on just put another doctor between 8 and 9.
8.2, 8.3, 8.4. Horrible.
Oh, wow.
I'm done stirring the pot.
No, you're not.
This week.
Just for tonight.
So next week, we'll be coming back with the haunting of Via Diodata.
Diodati, I think. Let's go with Diodati. I'd have to go look.
Sounds good. So we're in Lake Geneva in the early 1800s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And classic ghost story, because why not?
Well, and yeah, we heard rumors before that we were going to have a Frankenstein's monster-esque story featuring the Cybermen, and that leads us very. I mean, we know that the two-parter finale is going to involve Cybermen, so right. I feel like this one might be teeing them up.
Well, because given the titles that we have for the last two episodes being, correct me if I'm wrong, we got the Lone Cybermen and then the Timeless Children.
Yes,
I think plural as the final. So that in and of itself is a bit of a what? But yeah, this could be a really interesting tee up if this exposes in the final moments who our lone Cyberman really is. That becomes the inspiration for Frankenstein's monster and Shelley's composition. And then we get to pursue it at full tilt in the final two episodes. But man, I'm always a big fan of classic ghost stories when it comes to Doctor Who, because there's always those instances where the ghost proves to be anything but spectral, and has to do with someone who's slightly out of sync with time, or is trapped between universes, and we're only getting glimpses of them, or it's a cyber invasion and the army of ghosts and things of that sort. So this has all the makings of being yet another great installment in Ghosts Aren't Real. There's far more terrifying things to deal with. Let's go.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be great, but I'm going to be watching it the entire time, waiting for the setup for Ascension of the Cybermen.
Nice. Well, I will be watching this one as part of a live viewing session at Gallifrey 1, so I'll get to watch people lose their poop in large numbers live time. So that's always fun.
Awesome. Well, this has been episode 369 of Gallifrey Public Radio. Until next week, this is Jay saying, you want a plan? Come to me. Identifying which plan's going to work, that's the tricky bit.
And this is Gear saying, helps out there, as much or as little as you need.
And this is Haley saying, Dr. 8.3.7 was just a security patch.
We'll see you guys next week.
LZ.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Gallifrey Public Radio. Join us each week for new episodes. We love getting feedback from listeners, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts with us. You can email us at feedback@gallifreypublicradio.com. Tell us on Twitter @GallifreyRadio or on Facebook at facebook.com/GallifreyPublicRadio. You can also leave us a voicemail for inclusion in future shows at 210-802-1477. That's 210-802-1GPR. You should also go to gunnageek.com and check out lots of other high-quality geek-centric shows, or visit forums.gunnageek.com to talk about anything geeky with us or the community.
I'm Jacob Henson. Gallifrey Public Radio is copyright 2020. See you next week.